We will begin with a common perspective on LGBT, which is the belief that LGBT is an unnatural phenomenon. For those who do not know what LGBT is, it is a term that refers to different sexual orientations and gender identities. The term LGBT is used to call a community that includes people with different gender orientations. Specifically, the letter L stands for lesbian, meaning homosexual women. Homosexual women are those who have a female body but feel more attracted to women than men. This attraction applies to both emotional and sexual aspects. The letter G stands for gay, meaning homosexual men. This is the opposite of lesbians, meaning your body is male, but you are more attracted to men in terms of sexual and emotional aspects, rather than feeling attracted to women. The letters B and T stand for bisexual and transgender. Bisexual means you feel attracted to both men and women. Transgender means you realize that you have a male body but your soul is female. Therefore, you are transgender, meaning you change your body to align your gender from the inside out. Later, there is also LGBTQIA+. The QIA and plus are an extension for those who do not want to be labeled in any gender. And intersex people. Intersex means you are born with biological characteristics that do not fit the common definition of male or female. That is, you may have different chromosomes or different genitalia than normal. And asexual people. Asexual means you do not feel any attraction to either men or women, or if you do, it is very little. Similarly, there are other types of gender. And the view that LGBT is unnatural sounds reasonable. When you are living in a society where men and women are always a couple. With that popular model, the appearance of a male-male or female-female couple, or even a couple where both are asexual, is easily considered abnormal and unnatural. And despite the fact that the World Health Organization, often abbreviated as WHO, which is one of the most reputable organizations in the world, not only because this organization is a gathering of experts in the field of medicine and health, but because the information that this organization provides is based on empirical science. That is, people have verified it. And most countries use WHO recommendations to build their own health policies. Just like Vietnam, which has also cooperated very closely with this WHO organization in controlling the COVID-19 pandemic or outbreaks of bird flu. The number of people with opposing views on LGBT is still very high. So what has WHO said about LGBT? And who has a clear and consistent view on the LGBT community? They affirm that LGBT is a natural aspect of human beings and is not a disease. Because it is natural, LGBT cannot be cured and does not need to be cured. Because LGBT is not a disease or a type of serious psychological disorder that needs treatment. It is the same abroad and in Vietnam. Vietnam also strongly opposes conversion therapies for homosexuals, as well as finding ways to handle forced treatment behaviors for people in the LGBT community. However, society is complex. And people have a tendency to believe and live according to views that are consistent with their own feelings rather than believing in the truth. So the anti-LGBT faction always exists, despite the fact that the largest health organization in the world has confirmed that its nature is normal. And people of my age or older often say that in the past, there was no such thing. There were no psychological injuries, depression, or homosexuality. Society is now well-fed, and human brains are also chaotic because of that, giving birth to many sick things. But the truth is that in the past, there were also phenomena of homosexuality and psychological problems. But no one dared to confess. One is because the problem of food and money at that time was still a big problem to worry about. And second is because homosexuals in the past saw themselves as sick. So they suppressed it and did not dare to speak out. Because speaking out or showing the sickness of themselves is for what? To be ridiculed by others? And in reality, the issue of sexual harassment. And being harassed by homosexuals is a common occurrence. It is just that the victims of harassment do not speak out. There are many stories of male students being teased, like "let me suck your penis, and I will give you 50. And there are many similar stories. So having information confirming that homosexuality is natural has helped these people release feelings of guilt about gender and their own sexual orientation, helping them see these trends more normally, instead of feeling burdened by it. However, there are also conspiracy theories that who must announce it, must confirm LGBT is normal to ease the pressure of the homosexual world through protests and lobbying by LGBT activists, not because they finished their research and then came to a conclusion based on medical findings. Besides that, there are 4 other conspiracy theories about LGBT. For example, the gay lobby theory, which assumes that there is a secret power group trying to secretly propagate this homosexual trend into society. Especially, they target children to break the structure of a traditional family and overturn the natural order. The second conspiracy theory about LGBT is grooming, which means seducing. This theory is like an accusation that is very lacking in basis when people assume that those who support LGBT rights are trying to approach and mold the gender of children through educational programs or cultural events. That is, they instill in children that homosexuality is normal, while children are not yet aware of their own gender. And the third conspiracy theory about LGBT is called gender ideology, which means a gender ideology. And this view assumes that the concept of gender is a political tool created to aim at eliminating the biological differences between men and women, and from there, they will easily control society. And the final theory is that LGBT is not natural, but is due to environmental pollution, chemicals in food, or a social trend. Born, like there are components that like to go against the wind, like the feeling of being different from the crowd. So the LGBT movement was born from those desires. In summary, there will be 2 main factions: opposing and agreeing. The opposing faction thinks that LGBT is abnormal and unnatural, while the supporting faction believes that LGBT is natural and normal. And each side has its own arguments. There will be a third faction, which is people who do not oppose but also do not support, and they will look at LGBT as a phenomenon, and they look to understand where this LGBT phenomenon comes from. That is, they look for the root cause that gave birth to it. So first, with the opposing faction that LGBT is unnatural, with the view that it is natural, there are always 2 sides, yin and yang, men and women. And complementing each other, that is normal. How can there be yin with yin and yang with yang? Clearly, that is abnormal. But if the LGBT phenomenon actually exists in nature, what then? Then that truth not only breaks the view of the anti-LGBT faction but also breaks the view of this faction about nature. That is, they define nature in a somewhat subjective way and assume that nature only has two opposing sides, and what lies outside these two sides is abnormal or a mistake. While the truth is that nature has countless aspects and appearances that you may not be aware of. The closest to humans are animals, so we will learn about zoology first. In the famous book called Biological Exuberance, translated as Biological Abundance, released in 1999 by a biologist named Bruce Bagmill, along with the synthesis research of evolutionary biologist Joan Ruff-Garden, the scientific community has recorded homosexual, bisexual, and transgender behaviors in over 1,500 animal species. From large animals like primates, mammals, and birds to small creatures like insects and roundworms. Most notably, there is a species called bonobo, which means pygmy chimpanzee. This is an animal that is closest to humans in the evolutionary process because they share 98.7% of DNA with humans. And the sexual life of the bonobo species is also extremely diverse. And their sexual activities exist in both heterosexual and homosexual forms. That is, bonobos do not only use sex for reproduction, but they also use sex to greet, to resolve conflicts, and to tighten solidarity in the herd. Bonobos also rub their genitals against each other, and this rubbing behavior is considered the most natural expression of the lesbian phenomenon today, which in the past, bonobos often did completely instinctively. Next is the sexual orientation of black swans. Research has shown that about 20% of black swan pairs are homosexual pairs, that is, two males. And the surprising thing is that the scientific community has discovered that the nests of black swan pairs that are two males have a higher survival rate for their young compared to heterosexual pairs. The reason may be that two males are healthier and larger, so they will protect the territory and protect the young they adopt or steal better than other predators. Or take penguins, for example. A penguin pair consisting of two males, very famous, named Roy and Silo. At the Central Park Zoo in the US, they paired up, built a nest, and successfully hatched an egg. This egg was brought by the zookeeper for them to incubate. After that, these two raised the penguin chick perfectly. You can argue that animals are stupider than humans, so the fact that they are sexually and gender deviant is easy to understand. So now we will come to species that are outside the evaluation of smart or stupid. Just purely biological, which is botany. In botany, although plants do not have a central nervous system to have emotions or sexual behavior like animals or humans, if you look at how nature distributes gender, you will see that nature has never been a binary system, that is, there is only one male or one female. Specifically, in the concept called hermaphrodite, hermaphrodite means bisexuality in plants. There are over 80% of flowering plant species on Earth that are bisexual, meaning they carry both male and female parts on the same flower. If you look at the gender aspect of plants, it is very diverse. And it can be said to be infinite and boundless. Because there are species like Schizophyllum commune, which means split-gill mushroom, and this split-gill mushroom species has over 23,000 different genders. And any individual within these 23,000 genders can pair up to reproduce, as long as they are not of the same gender. This means that pairs of this mushroom species are completely homosexual. If they are of different genders, they will not pair up. If you want to verify what is true or false, what is natural or unnatural, the fastest way is to look at activities in nature to check if it exists. And this has proven a truth that nature is very diverse, flexible, and it goes beyond the framework of the two common male and female sides. And the diversity in gender is the true operating rule of nature. Not the two male-female sides that are natural. If we talk about evolution in nature, we cannot help but mention Charles Darwin, because Darwin was a very famous naturalist. So according to Darwin's theory of evolution, there is something called Darwin's paradox, meaning traits that do not help maintain the species, that is, do not help with reproduction, then those traits will be eliminated by nature. Because if sex does not aim for reproduction, then what does sex exist for? So the question raised here is why the homosexual gene, which is considered a mistake, has not been eliminated for millions of years, but continues to be passed down in humans from prehistoric times to this day. So the evolutionary science community has found very interesting mechanisms to explain why nature tries to keep the homosexual gene, like a survival strategy for the whole community. Specifically, it is as follows. The legendary biologist named Edward O. Wilson proposed a hypothesis called kin selection or the gay uncle hypothesis, meaning the homosexual uncle. That is, this man assumes that in prehistoric times, resources and food were very scarce. So if a family had too many children, parents would not have enough strength to raise them. And when they could not raise them, the death rate would be very high. So nature created some homosexual individuals, that is, they do not have children directly through sexual intercourse. And these homosexual uncles or aunts will not compete for resources in terms of reproduction, but they only play a role like a reserve human resource, aiming to help protect the herd and find food, as well as raise the children of their siblings, that is, children who carry the same gene as them. And thanks to these homosexual uncles or aunts, the survival rate of the next generations has increased significantly. Or in 2004, there was a researcher named Andrea Campirio-Ciani who presented a theory called antagonistic pleiotropy, which means the theory of antagonistic pleiotropy. Because this man discovered a shocking truth that genes related to male homosexuality also simultaneously increase reproductive ability in women. That is, mothers and aunts of homosexual men often give birth to more children, and those children are healthier than average. Nature is ready to sacrifice the reproductive ability of one man to exchange for reproductive strength, superior for women with the same bloodline, aiming to ensure the maintenance of numbers for the whole herd. Besides that, just like bonobos, sex in nature does not only exist for the purpose of reproduction, but it is also to help unite with each other among homosexuals. In prehistoric tribes, the competition for survival was very fierce. So homosexual relationships help tighten the alliance between male warriors or create extremely close support among women. It is like homosexual sex is a glue that helps bond the society of prehistoric people. In summary, if you consider homosexuality or other gender trends as a mistake of nature, then in the scientific framework, this view is definitely wrong. Because homosexuality is a very sophisticated feature of the evolutionary process. That is, the existence of homosexuals is a self-balancing mechanism of nature. It helps reduce population explosions, helps promote herd bonding, and supports care for future generations. So if homosexuality and heterosexuality are completely natural, and are a necessary element, an inseparable part of the biological structure of the Earth. But in reality, the scientific community does not argue much about homosexuality. But the most fierce arguments about homosexuality come from religion, spirituality, or even philosophy. The homosexual phenomenon has been the focus of fierce arguments, spanning thousands of years. And in spirituality and religion, people do not support or reject homosexuality through DNA-like science, but they will measure the homosexual phenomenon through faith, through values and how humans define the purpose of existence. So now, before coming to the fiery battles of religion and philosophy about the topic of homosexuality, let us try to see the religion that is considered to have very little or even completely non-existent holy wars, which is Buddhism. Let us see what Buddhism says about homosexuality. When the Buddha was alive, concepts like LGBT, sexual orientation, or gender identity did not exist in Indian society 2,500 years ago. That is, homosexuality was not defined as a social identity as it is today. But as I said, homosexuality exists in both plants and animals from prehistoric times. So surely in the time of the Buddha, there were homosexuals. Specifically, in Mahavagga, which is a major volume in the Vinaya Pitaka. The Buddha set out very strict regulations and moral boundaries to apply to those with different sexual orientations. Specifically, they were divided into two groups as follows. One is Abhidobhayanjanika, meaning bisexual. Bisexuals are people who have biological characteristics of both male and female genders. And the second is Pandaka, meaning asexual, compared to normal male and female genders. Pandaka is a complex Pali term, and it is often translated as eunuch. Eunuch means those who are effeminate, like bisexual, or men who have passive sexual desires for other men. And in the Samantapasadika, which is the commentary on the Vinaya by Buddhaghosa, there are 5 types of asexuals divided as follows. 1 is Asiddhapandika, meaning men who only achieve pleasure when performing oral sex on other men, that is, swallowing semen. And the second is Usuiyapandika, meaning men who are impotent. And these impotent people only achieve pleasure by peeking at other couples having sex. And the third is Opakamikapandika, meaning people who are castrated. Castrated means those who have had their genitals removed. And the fourth is Pakapandika, meaning people with physiological disorders according to the lunar cycle, that is, half the month they have male ability. And half the month they lose that ability. And finally, Napumsakapandika, meaning intersex people, or also called intersex. They are born without clear genitalia. Thus, asexual in Buddhism is described as a deficiency in biological structure or a disorder, or hypersexuality, like hypersexuality, not a completely normal man, and having homosexual love. Healthy homosexual men today, if they have the ability to keep boundaries and control their own behavior, they will absolutely not be classified into this asexual group. And specifically, the Buddha regulated that asexuals and bisexuals are not allowed to be ordained. That is, not allowed to be monks. If any monk has already been ordained and is discovered to belong to this asexual group, that person must return to lay life. Why is there this prohibition? Is it because the Buddha discriminated against these people? Definitely not. Because if there was still discrimination, the Buddha would not be called the Buddha. You need to remember that the Buddha expelled a person not because of their gender, but because of the things they did. So this decision actually stemmed from a real event recorded in the Vinaya like this. At that time, there was a person with an asexual status who was ordained and became a monk. However, the asexual monk could not control their sexual desires. So the person came to meet younger monks and teased them, saying, "Hey monks, come here and do something impure with me." Impure means sexual intercourse. So the young monks refused these men and scolded, "Go away, you asexual, you destroyer. We do not need anything from you." After being rejected, this person turned to target novices, who are new monks and have not been fully ordained as monks. The novices had muscular bodies, and he also teased them similarly. The novices also chased and scolded this person. So when he was not satisfied in the monastery, the asexual monk went outside and approached ordinary laborers, specifically those who herded elephants and horses. In some translated versions, it also mentions cowherds. So this person teased them and the elephant herders. The horse herders agreed to perform sexual acts with this monk. After the act was done, these laborers brought the story to ridicule and criticize the Sangha in a very toxic way, saying that monks are all effeminate. Any monk who is not asexual then goes to do impure things with asexual people. They are all lecherous. And this rumor about this contempt spread everywhere to the ears of the senior monks. So they reported this event to the Buddha, and after scolding the monk, the Buddha summoned the Sangha and issued a historical legal verdict, which is, "Hey monks, a person who is asexual, if not yet ordained, then not allowed to be ordained. If already ordained, then must be expelled." Expelled means to be removed from the Sangha to protect the existence, protect the strict nature of the Sangha, and avoid affecting the trust of society. So the Buddha issued a ban, as I said. This is a decision with an administrative management nature and protects the organization, not a judgment with a punitive nature or discriminating against homosexuals. Because even if not ordained, these asexual people can still be lay people and practice at home. They can still listen to the Dharma, still practice, and achieve liberation. Just like many others, for example, the fruit of stream entry. The core of a monastic life is celibacy. Celibacy can also be understood as cutting off sexual desires. An asexual person, when they have been burned by the fire of physiology too strongly, their mind is nailed to sexual desires to the point of being chaotic, going to seduce everywhere. So with a mind that cannot conquer sexual desires like that, they do not have the psychological structure calm enough to achieve meditative absorption, and it is very difficult to practice to be liberated. Letting these people be in the Sangha only makes them feel tormented and difficult to control. The act of breaking the purity of others. And the second is the social reality that the Brahmin religion at that time was extremely conservative and discriminated against asexual people. So if the Buddha turned the Sangha into a hiding place for these lecherous asexual people, then the entire reputation of the Sangha would collapse immediately. People would cut off the supply of food, then the whole Sangha would die of hunger. And the true Dharma would be destroyed before it could spread. So at some level, the expulsion of the Buddha for asexual people was not because the Buddha hated them, but because in terms of politics. This is a very sharp, very cold crisis management action, but extremely necessary for a great master to aim at protecting the Sangha ship existing in the ocean of prejudices of that time. So how does Buddhism view homosexuality? Beyond science, the Buddha views all phenomena based on their nature and natural laws. Specifically, in the Samyutta Nikaya, which is the connected discourses. In the section on the cycle of rebirth, the Buddha taught that the cycle of rebirth is long to the point of having no starting point. So in millions of lifetimes, you and I have both been men. And have both been women. Therefore, the fact that a person in this life has a male body but a female soul, or has an attraction to the same gender, is simply the remainder of habits. Habits mean psychological habits from previous lives intertwined. This means gender is also impermanent, just like many other things. Homosexuality is just a very normal phenomenon of cause and effect, of biology and psychology, so Buddhism does not consider homosexuality a punishment of the universe and is not worth being condemned or ridiculed. Besides, the focus of Buddhism is towards liberation. So homosexuality or heterosexuality are all within what is called desire. Because for the ultimate goal of liberation, which is nirvana, the Buddha does not distinguish between homosexual desire and heterosexual desire.